let's move on to this next story. This is something Kyle and I absolutely care a lot about. It's something which has been roiling the debate here in DC. Krystal and I have been making pains in order to make sure that you guys know of the actual tax increases and cuts within the bill, because what they have tried to do is frame all of these phony taxes of, oh, we're doing a minimum tax, or, oh, we're going to increase IRS enforcement, and that's going to go after the rich. But in terms of the actual provision that made it to the actual text which passed the House of Representatives, what is currently included in that bill is a massive tax cut for the wealthy. And now we actually know just how much of a tax cut we're talking about. So let's put this up there on the screen. We're talking, of course, about the SALT cap deduction, or the SALT cap increase from $10,000, as you can see there on the screen. According to the data run by the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation, they have found that over 2/3 of multimillionaires will get a tax cut under the Build Back Better plan. And the reason for that, Kyle, is that by increasing the amount of state taxes that you can deduct from your federal tax burden, they will push it from $10,000 to approximately $70,000 or $80,000. I want you guys to sit at home and think about how wealthy you have to be paying $80,000, $90,000 when in state income taxes. That means the highest state income tax in the country is 13% in the state of California. So you still have to be making in a 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 figure for this to even come into play, which means that this will be overwhelmingly targeted. The benefit in terms of the money saved and your ability to deduct from the people at the very highest income of the spectrum. I always take pains to explain that, Kyle, because we hear from people in the show who are like, hey, I make like 200, 300 grand. I live in California. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually not a lot of money. I understand that you would save money. I'm not downplaying that whatsoever. But you have to understand that 90% of the benefit goes to the very wealthiest in the 1%. And that's the important part about this.
Yeah, so let me give everybody more backstory on this, because the reason why that ultimately was in the legislation is because that was effectively the only way that the Democrats could guarantee that you get the most hardcore corporatists on board,
right.
People like Gottheimer. So in other words, there's no way this thing would have passed without that. Now, having said that, is that a bitter pill that I could swallow if you make up for it in other ways in the legislation, like, for example, a billionaire's tax, like, for example, a corporate tax increase? I could swallow that bitter pill if that was the case, but the fact of the matter is that's not the case.
Yes.
And by the way, it was actually Donald Trump who got rid of the SALT tax.
Yeah.
And now, to be fair, his 2017 tax cut bill overall, 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. But, this was viewed as, it's for blue states for the most part. So
yes,
it was viewed almost as like a political—
New Jersey, California,
right.
New York.
So, the SALT tax, again, just to reiterate for people, it's this idea that you can deduct from your federal taxes the amount that you pay in state and local taxes. And that generally goes to, wealthy people in blue states.
San Francisco, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, the issue here is we were presented the Build Back Better bill as one thing, as, okay, we're going to have a billionaire tax in it, or a top marginal tax increase, or a corporate tax increase, and slowly but surely over time, one by one, they stripped those things. And they stripped them because the likes of Manchin and Sinema and other corporatists said, no, I don't want to do that one. No, that one's divisive. No, that one's not okay. So now, at the end of the day, we're left with a tax cut for relatively wealthy people in what's supposed to be a progressive piece of legislation. It's absolutely absurd, and I'd vote no every day of the week on this.
Yeah, and I think people need to understand, too, that the amount that this is going to cost the federal government is $300 billion. And so just so you know, they could do the entire child tax credit for a year with that type of money. They could actually fund a social welfare program for 2 or 3 years in terms of pre-K and all that stuff with that money. In terms of its actual cost, it is the single largest cost within the bill, within the Build Back Better bill. And I know that doesn't sound right, but whenever you're going to take a tax revenue away, it is technically scored as a cost within the legislation itself. That is the reality. And if that wasn't worse, really what it is that by some measures, middle-class taxes could actually go up. And worse than middle-class taxes is an expenditure which, the progressive left claims to care a lot about. And our friend Matt Brunegg, who has been doing an excellent job on this, put it up there on the screen. he's actually shown that under the current Build Back Better plan, if the national average cost of universal pre-K is $10,000 a year, which nationally allocates $504 per preschool age child in year one, it would fund pre-K spots for only about 5% of kids. So the pre-K, the pre-K provision within the bill would only actually apply to about 5% of all American children, so it'd be pretty ridiculous to call it universal pre-K in any way. And Kyle, the other thing that he's pointed to is that this could actually increase childcare costs for a lot of middle class families in the American South. The reason being that the way that you structure these programs is that you block grant money to the states, and then the states get to decide how to spend it. We did this with Medicare, because of the federal system. Now, because of that, though, and because of the southern states' likelihood to not want to disperse it or to use it in a different way or set different income floors and all of that, the practical implication would be that childcare costs would actually go up, especially for poor middle-class people in the American South, which, by the way, are, disproportionately black. Apparently, they claim to care about a lot of these people. So we have a $300 billion tax cut for the wealthiest 1% of Americans, and then we have no actual universal pre-K if you claim to, want to espouse those beliefs, and you have increase in childcare cost.
So God bless Matt Bruning for diving into the details of this, because nobody else is diving into the details of this, and this is stuff that major media outlets should be doing, but they're not doing. So credit to him for doing that. Look, call it what it is. This is a neoliberal scam. That's what it is. And what Democrats have done in the modern era is they try to take things that are a win in name only effectively and then use that. So for example, Obamacare. Obamacare is an individual mandate system. That idea was actually birthed by a right-wing think tank,
the
Heritage Foundation. It used to be that policy used to be supported by the likes of Chuck Grassley and Newt Gingrich.
Right. It was the 93 response to the Clinton healthcare plan.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, but then eventually the Democrats end up getting that through, and they act like this is some sort of big win for left ideas. It's simply not. It's a neoliberal scam because it just helps the private insurers. It mandates you go to private insurers and give them more money effectively. Now, this is the same sort of thing we're talking about here. When the Build Back Better bill originally came out, when you went provision by provision, everything was so popular. Elder care, 79% popular. Medicare drug price negotiations, 73% popular. Lowering Medicare age, 59%. Universal pre-K, 59%. Tuition-free community college, 58%. You go down the list, everything's popular. But guess what? Voters are going to know it if you pass, first of all, a massively watered-down piece of legislation, and then second of all, when you look at the specifics, it's not even the thing that they say it is. You can't say you're doing childcare, pre-K, and then you get to the specifics of it, and it's like, oh, by the way, you're going to end up paying more. People are going to know that, and you're going to get punished at the ballot box for it, of course.
Which is what happened in Obamacare. People were like, you said my costs would go down, and I could keep my doctor. And then I lost my doctor, and now the cost has gone up. And I can tell you, as somebody who now has to purchase insurance out on those private exchanges, it's an exorbitant cost. It's completely ridiculous. Even when it was employer-based, you're still paying hundreds of dollars a month for, some crazy amount of deductible. It's like, oh yeah, this is basically insurance. If you get plowed by a car, then sure, you're covered. But, if you have general sickness, God help you. And I think you're pointing to something very clear. Look, you can try and spin this all you want. But at the end of the day, as you're seeing at the food and gas prices, when it actually comes down to it and you got to pay more for your childcare, you're going to know. And you're especially going to know when somebody's like, hey, did you know that not only does your cost go up, but the richest people in this country got a tax cut in the same legislation? They're all doing backflips, just so people know, in terms of how they have shoved this legislation have shoved this provision into this legislation. And I do think it tells you everything you need to know, that this is the only thing that survived. As you said, sure, coalitional trading and all of that, it makes sense. If you give the guys one thing as long as you get your thing. But you're not actually getting your thing.
You're not getting your thing. No, and look, I'll say it as simply as possible. The model, if you want to win and you want to do the things that are good for the country, the New Deal is the model. You go with broad, universal programs that are actually universal in nature, that are funded by taxes on the wealthy. That's how you win. And the reason why the Democrats don't go in that direction is very simple. They are beholden to the donors. They are beholden to the corporations, they're beholden to the billionaires. And so what the Democrats try to do is split the difference between the donors and the lobbyists who are telling them what to do and the voters who say, look, we want common sense policies. In 2006, the Democrats ran on lowering drug prices.
That's right.
2006. Now we're having this conversation again. This time, Kyrsten Sinema takes $1 million from pharma and then turns around and is now against lowering drug prices when she ran and had ads on "I'm for lowering drug prices," and then they come to a compromise. Get this, I don't know if you heard this story.
Yeah.
It's a compromise. We're going to lower 10 drug prices.
Right.
And what about the other 1,000 drugs that are out there? Are those people just screwed?
Yeah.
You think voters aren't going to see this and then punish you as a result of it? And they are doing that, which is why you see Biden at 38%. It's why you see Kamala at 28%. It's why you see Mayor Pete at 37%. It's why the Republicans are up 10 points in the generic ballot. Saagar, you need to have Democrats up like 5 points just for them to maintain the status quo.
I know. Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday, which is that an 11-point win is actually 11-point gain is actually higher than it was in the Tea Party wave of 2010. It's double what we saw back then, and that was a 50-seat gain. So this time around, who the hell knows? Let's see how high it can actually be.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.